Chevre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich, begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically, spiritually. We are going to discuss a thought for the week of Parshas Toldos. Before we start, as usual, we'll begin with a pasuk from the Rebbe's new kapitel, pasuk Tzadik Tes. Mikol malamdai hiskalti, kiedei secho sicholi. From all my teachers I have become wiser, because your testimonies are my discussion. Rashi says, Mikol malamdai hiskalti. From all my teachers I have become wiser. Mizel amadati k'tzas. From this one I learned a bit, and from that one I learned a bit. After having learned from my prime teacher. So the message is here that we have to be disciples from teachers, and maybe you meant to have be a Rab Muvok. You should have one teacher who's your prime teacher. But you should receive from all your teachers and learn from every one of them. In this week's Parsha, the Parsha begins, Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram, Avram hoiledes Yitzchak. These are the children of Yitzchak, the son of Avram. Avram gave birth to Yitzchak. So, Avram begat Yitzchak. So the obvious question is, once the pasuk says, Yitzchak ben Avram, that Yitzchak was the child of Avram, why does the pasuk then repeat, Avram hoiledes Yitzchak? Avram was the father of Yitzchak. We just said he was ben Avram. So Rashi mentions two answers. See there. One is that you should know Avram hoiledes Yitzchak. That Avram became the father to Yitzchak after he changed his name Avraham. The second answer Rashi gives were that there were scoffers that thought that maybe Yitzchak was the child of Avimelech, so therefore the Eibishter made the Yitzchak's face, Ma'os HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tzar Klaster Ponav Shel Yitzchak Doimel Avram, Vehidu HaKoil Avram Hoiledes Yitzchak. The Eibishter made it the Yitzchak's face looked like his father's face, and therefore it was obvious that Avram was his father. And that's why the pasuk has to tell us Avram hoiledes Yitzchak, to let us know that there were people that scoffed and that Hashem made a special miracle, let's call it that for now, that Yitzchak's face was similar to Avram's. There's a medrash also over here, which is going to be related to our talk, that Yitzchak ben Avram means that Yitzchak took pride that his father was Avram. And Avram hoiledes Yitzchak teaches us that Avram took pride that his son was Yitzchak. So to understand over here, like what's the big deal? What's the message over here? What's the profound message? Every pasuk has to have a deeper meaning and a moral and an instruction, a lesson. What's the lesson here? And especially the way Rashi makes a big deal that Hashem made Yitzchak's face similar to Avram's face. I mean, that's usual, no? That the child looks similar to his parents. So why over here is there such a big deal about it? I mean, you could say that in most cases, that's the way it is. So to understand this, maybe we could understand it first by asking another interesting question. And that is, right away, it says about how Yitzchak gave birth, became the father to Esav and Yaakov. And what happened? First it says that Yitzchak took a wife, Rivka, Bas Besul Harami, Mipadan Aram, Achos Lovan Harami. And Rashi says, why does it mention over here that Rivka was the daughter of Besul Harami and the sister of Lovan Harami? So Rashi says, to bring out her praise. Lahagit Shvacha, Shahoisa Bas Rasha, Vachos Rasha, Umakoima Anshe Rasha, V'loi Lamda Mimaseyem. She came from a house of gangsters, a family of gangsters, a city of gangsters. And she didn't learn from their ways. So therefore, that shows how special she was. Right after that, it says that Yitzchak and Rivka prayed to Hashem in order to have children. And the pasuk says, "Vayeter Yitzchak laHashem l'noichach ishtoi ki akorehi Vayosar loi Hashem v'ata Rivka ishtoi. And it says that Hashem was entreated by Yitzchak. Rashi says, v'loi lo. Hashem responded more to Yitzchak's prayers. Shein doima tilas tzadik ben Rasha l'tilas tzadik ben tzadik, because we can't compare the prayer of a righteous person, the son of a wicked person, an evil person, which is Rivka. She's a tzadikis, she's a Rivka, and she's the child of a Rasha, Besuel, to the prayer of a tzaddik ben tzaddik, one who is a righteous person, the son of a righteous person, Avram, who was the Yitzchak, who was the child of Avram and Sarah. So therefore Yitzchak's prayers were heard first. They had more power. So over here we have to ask a question, seemingly, from one pasuk to the next. 2 seconds ago, the last pasuk, Rashi says the praise of Rivka, that she, even though she was coming from a total hostile environment and spirituality, she rose above it, she transcended it, and she was a pure, holy person. And that's lahagit shvacha, to speak of her praise. She's so special, the rose amongst the thorns. And that's what makes her unique. And then right after that, when the pasuk talks about Hashem responding to the prayers, Rashi says the prayers of a tzaddik ben tzaddik, Yitzchak, is greater than the prayers of a tzaddik ben Rasha. So how do we reconcile these two concepts? I mean, after we speak about the praise of a Rasha ben tzaddik, like what's the real quality of a tzaddik ben tzaddik? And I once heard an answer. I don't remember from where, but I thought the answer was a great answer. What does it mean? This is one interpretation. When we say the quality of a tzaddik ben tzaddik, which means that even though you have an awesome father, a tremendous, larger than life, amazing, super talented, super special father, and nevertheless, you make your own contribution. You shine. Even in the shadow of a father like that. In a certain sense, that's much greater. When you're a tzaddik ben Rasha, true, you're great because you weren't influenced by your environment and you had to stay strong. That's one quality. True. But in a certain sense, you could say to be something from nothing, measured to others, it might not be such a big deal. Like we say concerning Noach, tzaddik b'deirosav, because everyone else was rotten, so to speak. But when you're amongst giants, and then you yourself emerge and shine out and stand out as your own individualistic giant in your own right, that's really something special. And therefore, this is what it means when we say Yitzchak was a tzaddik ben tzaddik. Even though his father was a tzaddik, and he was so amazing and so awesome, still Yitzchak became a tzaddik in his own right. Now, in the light of Kabbalah and Chassidus, this is especially significant. And this sheds light also. Now we'll get back to the pasuk. Eila Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram, Avram Toldos Yitzchak. And the true understanding and the significance of what it means that Hashem made Yitzchak's face similar to his father's Avram. According to Kabbalah and Chassidus, it's discussed very much how Avram represents Chesed. He's the attribute of Chesed Datzilus, the divine attribute of kindness. He is the physical personification of Hashem's attribute of kindness. Yitzchak, on the other hand, is the embodiment of the attribute of Gvura, severity. It's a different channel, a different ray, a different attribute completely. So therefore, really, in a certain sense, Yitzchak's face should look different, because it's a whole different revelation of godliness. Avram, who's a revelation of Chesed of Atzilus, has one face. Yitzchak, who's a revelation of Gvura of Atzilus, should have another face. Nevertheless, to bring out the point that Yitzchak is still a continuation of Avram, his face was similar to Avram. And here we see a beauty in Judaism that we don't find by any other discipline. And that is, the way it always is that the disciple is totally obsessed with his teacher, even though he later goes on to make a contribution which is, in a certain sense, totally original. You know, many times you come across books in psychology or philosophy, and there was the father of philosophy, the father of psychology, and then you read about his disciple, and then his disciple comes along and says, you know, my master got it wrong. And then another disciple, who's a disciple of the disciple, comes along and says, both of my predecessors got it wrong. And that's how it goes. I've seen this many times in many disciplines. I once came across an encyclopedia of philosophy, I think, and on the last page it said, are you confused? Good, that's the point. In other words, the whole build-up of this wisdom is how this one came along, he said this, he was wrong, then this one said this, etc., etc. But in Judaism, it doesn't work like that at all. We say there was the master, he didn't make any mistakes, he was right, and still, even though he was 100% right, there's still room for more. And even though the disciple was a fantastic, complete, full disciple of his master, he still goes on to make a unique contribution. And this is the meaning of the pasuk. Eila Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram. First of all, we have a Yitzchak. And he followed in Avram, and Avram hailed this Yitzchak. You had a great giant like Avram, and he made a disciple like Yitzchak. But we have to remember that even when we look at Yitzchak, he always had a teacher like Avram. This week, Yemir Hashem, is going to be Tes Yud Kislev. Tes Kislev is the Yemei Ledes and Yemei Lula of the Mittel Rebbe. Yud Kislev is his Chag HaGula. The Mittel Rebbe was the second Lubavitcher Rebbe. And his father, he was the son of the altareb. And by the way, interesting, it says about them, the altareb and the Mittel Rebbe, that as it says by Avram and Yitzchak, that Avram would walk around saying, look at my son Yitzchak, he's so much better than me, you think I'm special, look at him. And so too, Yitzchak would say, you think I'm special, look at my father Avram. It says that is brought down, was the same way the Alter Rebbe and the Mittel Rebbe would act. The Alter Rebbe would look at us, would say, you think I'm something? Look at my son, the Mittel Rebbe, he's so amazing. And the Mittel Rebbe would say, you think I'm something? You should see my father, the Alter Rebbe. So there's a story, one of my favorite stories, about the Alter Rebbe and the Mittel Rebbe, and it's printed in Torah Sholem. Those are talks of the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it's on page 218. And it says like this, that the Mittel Rebbe, when he was in his early years of marriage, a young man, he came to Yanovich. That was the town where his father-in-law lived. And the Mittel Rebbe saw another younger man, another young married man, and he was mevatel him. He made light of that other person, like, you know, your whole avodah, your whole service and your understanding is like pretty lame, average. That's, you know, that's what he said to him. In the original it says that he was mevatel to that chassid bebitul gomor, heim b'madregas asagosai, v'heim ba'ifan avidase betfila v'hadoima. Anyways, so then the other chassid turned to the Mittel Rebbe and he told him, I'm just going to read the key phrases here. What are you comparing yourself to me? Who is your father and who is my father? And therefore, who are you and who am I? Your father is the Alter Rebbe, and we all know his level. And when he had to bring down a soul, in other words, in your conception, when you were conceived, he knew what sort of thoughts to have, and he brought down a great soul, and from that you were born. And then you were guarded with, you know, in a very secure spiritual environment. Bist du ausgewachsen, was du bist? A shene chidosh. So therefore you grow up to be who you are, and it's no big deal. But me, we can understand already from where my father dragged me out. I was ariz geschlept for nights on the neshamas. I was dragged out of the treasury house of souls. And my father brought me up brought me up like a goat, like without care. And now my business is that I give loans to peasant farmers for them to be able to buy produce, grow produce. And in the winter, I have to gather the loans that they owe me. And there's a whole seder, there's a whole order how we go about it. I have to bring along a bottle of vodka. I have to travel at night, middle of the night. And I leave the house like at 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. I come to the goy. First thing is you have to have a drink. You have to drink with him l'chaim, because without that you can't even start talking to him. And then you have to give a kois lo'arei l'shaloi. You have to give a bit of vodka to his wife, because if not, she's going to destroy the whole deal. And then you have to go back to your wagon, from house to house, from farm to farm, and every night to get back some money from 2 or 3 of your people that loaned money from you. And then you have to come back to your house, and then you have to prepare yourself to go to the mikveh and daven. Versteht man doch, was für a davening das ist. So the chassid saying, you can understand already what kind of davening I'm able to daven after such a preparation. And actually in the Sikha of Teir Shalom it says this chassid was me'achsidim agdelim be'emes b'shkidas atfilah. He was really a very special chassid, but because of his modesty he spoke like that. And continuing the words of this chassid, he said, "Aber du bist doch Gott anders, but you, Mittel Rebbe, you're completely different. So how can you compare yourself to me, that you just made light of me and just will mevatel me completely?" Anyways, the Mittel Rebbe took these words very much to heart, and he immediately came back to Lozhna, to where he lived with his father, the altareb, and he came to the altareb. He lamented that his level of service till now was nothing compared to where he should really be holding. You know, we have to go to the next level. And he was very, very feeling inadequate, so to speak. Who he is, his avodah is not really complete compared to who he is. That's what he told his father, the Alter Rebbe. Anyways, later, at another time, when this chassid who had told that to the Mittel Rebbe came to the Alter Rebbe, then the Alter Rebbe told him, "I owe you a favor. Ich bin dir machzik teuve. Du hast gemacht mein Berlin for a chassid." He told this other chassid, "I want to thank you very much. You made my Berlin for a true chassid." In other words, when you showed him where he comes from, and therefore what is demanded of him, he began to demand of himself relative to the standard where he should be holding, and that's when he really maximized his potential and became really a chassid, demanding of himself more and more and growing in his spirituality relative to how he is meant to be growing. There's a famous Yiddish expression. It goes like this: "The Zayd is a leib, and the Tat is a bear, aber the Rikir is wer is er," which means my father was a lion. Sorry, my grandfather was a lion. My father was a bear. A bear is like a grizzly bear. He's a giant. My grandfather was a lion. My father was a bear. But the main thing is, who are you? Because you have a lot of people that like to say, my grandfather, he was so holy. My grandfather, he was such a Talmud Chacham. My father, he was such a chassid. It's very nice that you're walking around and you're proud of your grandfather and your father. It's good. But then you have to ask yourself, but who are you? It's very nice you have a big picture of your father in your house, even a bigger picture of your grandfather in your house. But what does your picture look like? And this is the lesson, one of the many lessons in this week's parsha. Eila Toldos, Yitzchak ben Avram Hildes Yitzchak. We're very, very proud of the Rebbe, and we're very, very proud of our teachers. Mikol Melamde Iskalti. But we also have to always think, can we say Avram Hildes Yitzchak? Is my teacher proud of me? Is my Rebbe proud of me? And the blessing is that the more we will be obsessed in a good way of our teachers, of our leaders, of our rabbis, and we live thinking about their virtues and their values and continue in their ways, then the more they will be proud of us. The Eibusher should help that through going in the right ways of our forefathers. We have to remember the whole point is that we should be not only like midgets standing on top of the giants, but the point is, like by Yitzchak, ultimately to be like giants standing on the top of giants. Because each one is a giant in his own right, because he has to make his own unique contribution. Good Shabbos, posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.